Okay, I think I'm recording now. I was having some audio difficulties a minute ago with this thing wanting to say the mic is unplugged. Anyways, we're recording now. Let's get going. This is going to be my review of Bonhoeffer. I'm going to say the name just like that for the duration of this review. This is not a ticket stub. This is a ticket stub from a different movie. I have no documentation, no proof that I saw the movie other than me being able to tell all about the movie that I just saw today. Uh, 12 7 2024, this day that would live in infamy because of the Pearl Harbor attack so many years ago. Didn't realize it was going to be on that day that I would see this film. Anyways, 4:48 p.m. as I'm making that, I got to say that just for the journal part of this thing. I got to I'm going to have to keep my eye on the mute button because apparently now I'm having the same audio issues as all the other people who use StreamYards and a mic. It just mutes all of a sudden. It's been working so good up until now. Anyways, hope you're all doing well. Whoever might watch this review slash my impressions of the movie. Um, I saw this with my aunt Marianne, my mother, and my cousin Mason. He's 13 years old, and I gotta preface this whole review by saying exactly how. Again, this is a journal channel about movies, so uh, just bear with me because I got to give you the reasoning in my mind. I got to give you the reasoning as to how I came to see this movie. I saw the trailer back in maybe it was for The Forge. I think it was for The Forge that I saw the trailer for this movie, and there was also another trailer for another movie about uh, a young girl escaping from Nazi Germany. I think I forget the name of it, but you probably can guess which movie it is. And I think there might have been a third movie, and they all had to do with World War II and at least some um, allusions to the Holocaust. And considering current events since the October, I'm sorry, attack of last year in Israel, horrible kidnapping and murders that took place, like 1,000 people, 1,200 people, and the war that's been going on since then. When I was sitting in that movie theater all those months ago, now it's been a couple months since we saw The Forge at AMC, Mobile, Alabama. I was sitting there thinking, wow, these are some conveniently timed movies. I'm sure there's no impetus behind these movies being made right now at this particular point in history. I didn't want to make too much of it, and I still don't. It's just that at the end of Bonhoeffer, it was basically confirmed in my mind. I was like, I hate this. I mean, you can't help it. And it's no big deal, I guess, in the end. But at the end of the movie, there's a little thing, and it's actually part of it is at least read, just part of it, not the whole thing. The little bit of information that's coming down the screen is actually read by, that's who it was because you just heard his voice for the past 2 hours. The actor who plays Bonhoeffer, Diedrich, his name is Jonas Dassler, and he's going to be one of these guys now who I'll never forget him ever because that's the kind of role he portrayed. That's the kind of character he portrayed in this film about the life and some of the events of uh, Bonhoeffer. And I enjoyed the movie. I want to go ahead and say that. And again, this is going to be a rambling review as I give my impressions of the film and what all it means to me, how I came to see it. When I saw that trailer, I think it was for The Forge. I think it was for trailers that were playing before The Forge played. And again, my review of the Forge is up on this channel also. I thought to myself, that one more so than these other couple. Again, there was like it was like a bombardment. Almost all the trailers for movies had to do with World War II and the Holocaust. I'm like, wow. You know what? Let me finish my thought from a second ago. I started to say this, but then I got sidetracked when I saw the guy's face, and he's got like a striking look to him. I mean, he is this role, this part that he played in the movie. It actually said some things, not only for the historical aspect of it, for instance, spoiler alert, in case you don't know, you should, considering this is a drama. Bonhoeffer is, of course, hung by the Nazis, and that's basically the very ending in the film. And the build up to it, again, I'll get to that part, but let me skip to the very end and what kind of nagged me just a little bit. It was some historical whatnot about how 2 weeks after he was hung, after he was executed, his fellow prisoners were actually rescued by the Allied forces. And it was like a difference of 2 weeks in between Bonhoeffer was hung for his quote unquote crimes and when Adolf Hitler killed himself and the war was over. It was he told one guy the war is over, even though the Nazis were still holding on for whatever lingering uh, loyalty they had to what they were doing. But yeah, there's a part in the film. I'll go ahead and talk about that part now, where he's been in prison in this house out in the country. That's how they did things with a bunch of others. I believe they were all Jews in that instance. How they were being held captive. And no, the house came at the end. First, they were in an actual jail, and with prison bars and the whole thing. And from there, you see in the film all these flashes from previous experiences he's had throughout his life, childhood, traveling to America, attending seminary. Just it's a rich kind of tapestry of just different things that they touched on. I thought it was well done, and it tugged at your heartstrings big time. And as far as these are all things he's remembering, and he's in a deep dark hole in the earth right now, in prison. That's where you first find him in the movie. The adult version of him, I should say. The film had actually started, I think, because we were getting to the theater, popcorn and Coke, all that stuff, right as it's like the earliest flashback of him playing chase with his brother. And well, I'll just start from the beginning whenever I get to that. But I want to get this out of the way as part of why in the world did I even watch this movie of all movies. It had to do with at the end, after he reads his part, you just read this part that isn't read by a narrator. You just read it on the screen. There was like a 1,200 or 12,000% increase in anti-Semitic attacks, basically, in 2024 or 2023, over the past year or so. How it was extremely bad in certain areas, even in like westernized countries in the U.S. and so forth, after the attack in Israel. And I just thought to myself, and I was thinking about it as we were driving home, and I'm listening to my aunt, my cousin, my mom talk about things, and I just kind of phased out, just thinking, I wish this had just been its own like drama. But when they do that, your brain can't help but think, oh, well, they made this movie because of current events. And that plays into how I came to see this movie in the first place. Yesterday, you talk about short notice. My Aunt Marion comes over here, and mind you, she's already passed along through my mom to me this pamphlet, this magazine, or whatever she gets from whatever, who knows what religious organization. I haven't read it all yet. It's like 8, 9 pages long. I got it in the semi truck. I said, I'm going to read this over the road as some reading material for too long about growing anti-Semitism and the dangers of these different organizations in the U.S. and other places that they target Jews, basically. And it's the same kind of, oh, well, if it happened there all those years ago, it might just happen here. That kind of, I'm not going to call it paranoia, because people have been attacked, people have been killed in recent years, even in these places where you wouldn't think an outright hatred of the Jews would exist. As far as, I mean, actual bigotry, real bigotry, hating somebody just for the sake of hating them, just because they're different from you, that kind of thing. Anyways, she's so, I'll just say, sincere in her thoughts and her beliefs and her concerns, that she said she looked down and she said, we're so blessed in this country. We've had it so good. And it's so terrible what's happening in Israel and the way some people are treated in this country and so on and so forth. And then she brought up this movie. I would not have seen Bonhoeffer today if not for my aunt wanting to go see it. And my mom also came, but also she wanted to take the boys. I'll just get the boys. Mason, my cousin Becky had 4 boys. One of them's almost grown. The other 3, not so much yet. And there's Mason. He's 13 years old. Couldn't find one of the other sons, but got at least Mason. And so she just wanted to do this. And there's not really anything I can say about it or against it. And I would be out of place if I tried, if I wanted to. I'm like, man, this is short notice. I drive a truck all week. I'm looking forward to my weekend. I didn't think I would be going to see some movie that I thought, you know what? Again, when I saw the trailer for it in the theater, I thought, if I did watch any of these movies, I think I'd want to see this one about this man, Bonhoeffer. And so that's what we ended up doing today. We spent 30 to 40 minutes because we weren't sure where Mason was. He's staying with his dad. We'd never been there over on Dickerson Sawmill Road or whatever. And so I'm driving and I am being my uber patient self for the whole thing. Not to pat myself on the back too much, but yeah, I got a couple of old boomers. And yeah, sometimes, especially when the baby boomer siblings are together, I didn't think this way just a few years ago. I sure do think of it now. I just kind of want to cross my arms, look back in the rearview mirror at them and over them, like, when they get to be around each other, it's almost like they never grew up. And they can be kind of obnoxious talking to each other. Again, not to talk bad about people. They'll never watch this video. Anyways, that's what I went through today, just to collect everybody and drive to the D'Iberville, Mississippi, the Grand 18. I'm loving this movie theater. I plan on spending many a day there, as many as possible, actually see a movie in the movie theater the way I like it. But I get no regard as far as ticket stubs. I want my memorabilia. I want my thick piece of paper, not this miserable Walmart receipt looking junk. I'm gonna have to start a crusade or something to get this done because it was pre-ordered. My mom did the stuff online, and so the box office, which they actually have a box office. The box office. You don't buy the tickets while you're buying your popcorn and junk at the same time. You get your tickets first. I like the Grand. Santikos.com. Now, then the guy in the foyer, young guy who I guess would take your tickets, he said, "Oh, I believe you. Somebody will take it, whatever." We never got our tickets. We just told them we paid online for these tickets. We got a confirmation number. But the best I'm going to be able to do is just to print out and have my mom forward me the email or something I printed out. Look, I saw Bonhoeffer. I want my ticket stub. Anyways, that's how I came to see Bonhoeffer today. I wouldn't have seen it otherwise. It was because my Aunt Marianne is so concerned about growing anti-Semitism, and that's important to note for this journal entry, December 7, 2024, on the David Sees Movie Journals channel. That's how I came to see this. I would not have seen it otherwise. And if I didn't see it at the movie theater, I wouldn't have seen it at any other later date. But I'm glad we caught the flick, and I'm glad it was so enjoyable and well done. And I'm glad Mason was able to see it because it was basically about Mason. And at least half the drive there, once we finally collected Mason, was Mom and Aunt Mamie going on about communism, which they've never lived under, but they know it's scary and bad. And so they're, after a point, and Mom's talking about Mao Zedong and Stalin, and how don't just support any crazy person who comes to power. And look, you got to think about what can happen. It was a good talk. Don't get me wrong. And Mason, he's listening to people older than him, and I can't help but think it's doing him some kind of good. It's just at some point talking about all the people who died, it was kind of fatiguing to me, as I thought this is a lot for a 13-year-old kid to be thinking about. But at any rate, wasn't quite as bad on the ride home as we were just chilling out and talking about how it was a good film and all. Anyways, a lot more could be said about just that part than I have already said. But let me finally get to the movie. It opens up to his childhood, and there's this perfect segue about his brother who fought in the First World War, the Great War. And it's such, I'll never forget this either. It's one of the most haunting scenes in the movie. His He's running from his brother, not out of fear. They're playing catch, and it's like the older brother can never catch Diedrich. He can never catch Bonhoeffer, whether because he's letting him get away or because as it's the idea of him liking to be able to get away, to play catch and get away, played into his later life in a very significant way. And I mean, big time, because this man fled reluctantly on occasion from one area to the other, smuggling himself and keeping things secret and so on and so forth. And you're immediately shown a good family life as they go from one room to the other. The older son chasing the younger. It must be. I'm not looking at biography or anything right now. Just several years apart because Diedrich Bonhoeffer, not Heimer, is significantly younger, or maybe I doubt 10 years apart. But what's so haunting is the way the family is scarred by what happened to him. He isn't mentioned, but maybe once more in the film. The older brother who has basically been called up, he's going to go off to the army, and but when you see that opening scene and how warm the family is, and how the father's like chuckling, he'll never catch that boy, and the such a loving mother that he had, and all these things. It was that part was it's a quality film as far as taking the time to do all these things, and the cinematography and the look of everything. When we were going out of the movie theater, I was telling my aunt, in real life, people look at each other just like you and I, but when they make so many of these productions about the 30s and 40s, they take a little bit of color out to add like this historical mystique to like the texture of everything and the lighting, and it makes things more romantic for sure, and nostalgia and all that. But there was one scene in particular where Bonhoeffer is talking with his sister, and it was just it was another good scene, and really putting you into their shoes as far as when she says something's coming, something that can't be stopped. This was before the Nazis had completely taken over Germany, and he, the actor, he was like lying on the bed and joking with his sister about how he used to pretend to smoke his dad's cigars. She came into the room saying, "You should never lie. You should never smoke while you're lying down." He's like, "Yeah, I used to come up here and into this room on this bed and pretend to smoke his cigarettes, but I could never get past the first puff." That kind of thing really sucked me into the movie as I was sitting there in the theater watching it all. And when you talk about like the passing of time and how he used to look up to the ceiling and just stare at it and say eternity, eternity, they end up, you got to understand the context of their conversation from talking about maybe how their brother died, things going on in their country, what it means for their family and all their friends, what's being done to the Jews that they're beginning to be aware of. Because while Bonhoeffer had gone to the USA to live in Harlem and befriend people there, and kind of discover what he really wanted to do as far as his life's work, things were changing big time in Germany while he was gone. And so when he goes back, his father, very down to earth man, and just telling him straightforward, things have changed so much, and it's some good dialogue, and as much as in about a minute, just catches the whole family up, and Bonhoeffer's like skeptical and like doubtful, like it can't be that bad. Are they really targeting people? How did he win the election? How did Hitler come to power? They only have so much support. How did they gain such steam as far as popularity? The Nazi National Socialist Party there, and that was just such a good scene. Just going from one person to the other, talking about. It was like a dining room. What do they call it? Kitchen table talk, except they're in the living room area where he had just finished playing on the piano a little bit of his jazz that he learned in Harlem, and the whole family's like, we're not used to that kind of music. But he was loving it, and you see, it just he can't help it. The actor did a good job of just letting it all flow out of him. How in love he was with jazz, and that conversation in the living room about how Hitler used the Versailles Treaty to gain power and exploit grievances. And Bonhoeffer, one of his reasonings was, well, people will never go for that. People will never go for the things this man is for. And his dad, who he's got so much more age and experience and doubting humanity, is he wasn't wrong to doubt it. He said there may be just enough people desperate in these desperate times to go for things, and that really can't help but strike a chord with anybody when you just tell them that. Maybe it's already over. Maybe there are things going on in society that are already marching toward some conclusion that may not be the one you want. It may not be a pleasant time to have to live through, but it's sure enough happening because so much has happened in the past that you can't go back and fix it. Anyway, it was just another good scene. But going back to the beginning, because I keep getting strayed into other things, but it's the movie's fault, because the way the movie, yeah, these flashbacks are all, for the most part, in chronological order of his life. It is still flashes going from one time to another, even though, yeah, you understand what I'm saying. So that's why this is such a disjointed review, as I'm talking about just everything that I remember in the movie as I give my impressions of it. When he hid from his brother in the very beginning, and he managed to successfully. I think his brother gave up. He hid behind a rabbit. They had a room that actually had some pets in it or something. He hid behind a rabbit cage and said, shh, and the rabbit didn't move or anything. And his brother came into one room and like, gotcha. I'm like, no, he's not in there. Another room. I got you now. Oh, no, not in there either. Ah, and then the last room, and was the one that Bonhoeffer was actually hiding in as a kid, and he didn't look around or anything. He was perfectly still. So it was it's a good it's just a good way to build up that part of his character, how he likes giving people the slip, which he had to do a lot after the Nazis took over. Um, his brother is going off to war, and I don't know that any movie has ever actually done this, or if they have, I can't recall one. Bonhoeffer isn't crying, but he's very sad as a kid, as the older brother is saying goodbye to everyone, and don't be sad. And his father had given a quick little talk like, you're going to come back a hero to a nation that will always be grateful to you for your courage. And that is something else that's burned into your brain in this movie. Like, no, not only does he not come back, the country isn't necessarily going to always be grateful for your courage and going off to war. And as the look on this actor's face, let me see if I can find his name here. Da, 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 as he's driving away, Walter Bonhoeffer, that Patrick Mulligan plays Walter Bonhoeffer. That's him. And he's got this look on his face. Again, Diedrich Bonhoeffer, the kid, he's not crying or anything, but he's just saying, "Father, Father," as he's running behind the car, and the father's like, he's doing what he's got to do. He's driving his older son who's going off to war to probably some train station or whatever collection point for young soldier recruits at that time. And he chases him to the end of the drive, and then he stops, and they just kept on driving because it, it's just him getting a little emotional when they already said goodbye and he can't stop. The father just kept driving because that's what you do. And the older son there, he had looked back at Diedrich, the actor did, and then just looking ahead, the expression on his face, just it was between like sadness and anger, like a face just caught in between, and he's just staring straight on, not looking directly into the camera or anything, and it just fixed on his face, like he's going off to war and he's leaving his family. He doesn't want to be leaving in this way. And that face that the actor held in that frame, it seemed like it lasted forever to me. Because then the next scene, same face, but it's like lying down, no color at all in his face. He's not asleep. He's dead. He's in a coffin. And the coffin is being shut. I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that did that exactly that way, that well, but I was like, wow. Because that's all the young Diedrich Bonhoeffer apparently knew of the Great War. It took his brother away from him. And then, carrying on with his life, he was interested in the church and religion. Again, the movie is first pastor and then spy, assassin. And from the trailer, I was thinking there was going to be some more hardcore stuff in it, but it's so much more intimate than a lot of like personal action that Bonhoeffer. He's not some soldier fighter or anything. He saw early on what was being done to society in Germany via infiltration of the church not speaking out, or perhaps I should say of religious people in a certain vicinity, because I don't want anybody to think that the church that Jesus Christ died for, right there in the pages of the New Testament, is to blame, because people, so much of this movie is, it's a recurring theme as you carry on, where Bonhoeffer reaches out to people in other countries for help. First, he travels to, I believe, England first. No, he traveled to Harlem, New York, in America, seminary stuff first. But then, after the situation is so horrible in his country, when he's reaching out for help, I should say, goes to England and then America, and I think back to England again. I might be getting things out of sequence, but I think it was England, uh, America, and England again. And the people, the pastors, the religious clergy, whatever, that he talks with are also not reluctant and not completely helpless, but it's like they don't know what to do to help him and what's going on in Germany, because it reaches a point in the movie where the Sunday school um, kids or whatever you might call them, they're all dressed up in, I guess it was Hitler Youth garb, and they're marching like soldiers. And he's like, our classes begin at 10. He's trying to stop them as they're marching, and then some Gestapo guys grab him. And there's a lot of manhandling and grabbing people by the scruff of the neck in this movie. And I think almost, I don't know that anybody was just outright shot in this movie. Again, it's Angel Studios, so it's uh they just do things differently. There's all this implied uh vanished into the middle of the night stuff and killed, but not a lot of. It's not a bloody action movie at all. It's just not that kind of film. It is a slow burn drama that makes you it makes you understand from the get go because Bonhoeffer is in like the whole movie. It is all him at one point of his life or another, and yeah. So he saw early on what was happening, and he tried so hard to warn others. Let me get this actor's name. This one was August Deal playing Martin Niemöller. He was uh, what was he? Wasn't a bishop. He was I forget what the term is, but he was similar to the Bonhoeffer within the religion, but not high as a bishop. Is that the way I'm saying it correctly? Anyways, Bonheimer, Bonhoeffer, not Bonheimer, tried to tell him, "Can you not hear in the sermons that are being preached how they're praising this man? They're praising Adolf Hitler, and not praising God. It's become the house of how should I say? It's like the house of the state instead of the house of God, kind of a thing. This is taking over things, and they're not speaking of this man as though he's just a man." And that's me putting it into my own words. And his friend, to his credit, he came around later. He came around big time. I won't say one thing was when it was too late because the history of Nazi Germany, it, it goes without saying that it was too late to do a lot of things. People only realized it when it was too late. And so you can't really blame one person too much when all of society is getting swept away. And that's what I started to say a minute ago about um, again, going back to Aunt Marianne, years ago, she gave me this book. It's called Suffering for Christ. I forget the Catholic priest's name, but it was written by a man, I can probably Google it real quick, who suffered quite a bit under the Soviet Union during those years. And I read the book, and toward the end of it, I just couldn't help it. I wasn't really offended. I wasn't like aggravating or anything. It's Tortured for Christ by Richard Birnbrand. That's the book. And toward the end of that book, he talks about how he tried to reach out to, we'll just say, Christians in the West, USA, England, and places. And I thought about that quite a bit while I was watching this movie, how you should have supported these people more in the horrible conditions. Again, two different eras. That was fascist Germany, and he lived in Soviet Russia. Warmbrand did. But this same thing applies to both. You can't help people unless you know what they're going through. And that's a conversation I had with my Aunt Marianne on the ride home. It's like, I personally have come to view most anybody in the news media, and particularly people who purport to be journalists, as though journalism is some new, there's nothing new under the sun. And yet, out of nowhere came this pseudo profession of journalism. What are they exactly? Are they historians? Are they scribes? What are they? Do they just record things? Because for all my life, it seems like they just are self-interested people who like getting one up on other people, other quote unquote journalists like to get the story, and they hide information. And I thought about that as I was watching this movie, and when I read that book way back when, it's like if the people weren't told the flat out dark, horrible maybe truth about what is happening in other countries, they're not going to know. People aren't psychic. And if there are people preventing the information from getting out, then it's just going to be hidden. And no rescue is coming for people who, like in Bonhoeffer's situation, he tried to reach out multiple times, and he was able to save some people's lives. And I was on the verge of tears at the instant when he had gone from being a pastor spy to assassin. They had decided to get together in this plot. I want to get this actor's name correct also, and get is he on here? I guess that's him. Flula Borg plays Hans. Yeah, Dunne. Just say Hans, who he had known forever, and he was basically in with the already undercover, uh, as I think of it, in Nazism, wearing the uniform and all. But he wasn't like one of them. He gets with Diedrich Bonhoeffer, and they're basically going to plot to blow up Hitler with a man who, this was the maybe the most tense part of the flick. This was basically going to be a suicide mission with this man who was going to. They're not giving me as many names as I would like them to. Had explosives underneath his uniform. He was going to blow up Hitler, basically, and they were going to kill him because. And it's great to watch the moral conundrum of it all, because there's this one fellow who had been with Bonhoeffer for quite a while. It was Eberhard Bethge, played by William Robinson, and he's like, "Can we do this? Will God forgive us if we do this?" And Bonhoeffer's like, "Will He forgive us if we don't?" It's like this movie actually grapples with that question of, when is violence permissible? It's something you probably thought about before. It's like, in that situation, when the government isn't really legitimate and they're disappearing people just because they are who they are, not that they've committed some crime against the state or are disruptive of the common peace or are criminals or anything. It's just because they were Jews, they were gypsies, they were this and that. It's like, anyways, I've lost my place. And I can't help it. Just thinking about this stuff, and this movie makes you think about it. You'll lose your place quick. Let me just pick a place. When he went to Harlem, New York, he discovered jazz and this actor who I realized I haven't seen that new movie, Alien Romulus. Maybe I'll give it a watch one day. But I just thought, oh man, I'm so sick of alien movies, especially with them doing them wrong. But this actor, David Johnson, he plays Frank Fisher. And I'm like, I haven't seen that movie, but I know that's him. He's the guy who plays the android in it. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's, you know what? I don't want to be pretty sure. Let me click on his name and see. Is that him or not? Alien Romulus. He was Andy. Okay. Again, I haven't seen Alien Romulus, but I recognize his face. I'm like, I've seen him somewhere. He gets in with him in Harlem. They were both students at the seminary together at the same time, and you get. I'm almost of two minds about this aspect of Bonhoeffer's character, because he has this thing where he ends up saying multiple times, "We want Christ without religion," and I, at least partially, disagree with that. I know part of you might say it's like, I like to just use words simply, whereas he maybe have been talking about some grand idea or something that maybe only he understands because he's such a unique person, and he kind of exudes in this movie a spirituality that that not everybody else does. And if religion is just, I mean, the meaning of the word, to kiss toward God, it is how you reach out to God. That's like what religion is. So to have Christ, but no, it does. It literally doesn't make logical sense in the movie. You kind of you understand what he's getting at. It's just it can't be gotten because Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he did set up a very organized, whether people like the term organized religion or not, he did set up things for you to do in the New Testament to walk in his way, to be pleasing to him, obedient to God, and so on and so forth. And so I kind of struggle with that a little bit, in as much as people of that sort don't understand, in my opinion, just how they have already become too intertwined with the state, like the civil authorities, the state. And that's something that, again, has happened throughout history in England, the English church in Germany, the different European. It's not the same as like in the US, where, well, it's just different. For sure, it's different. And that was evident in the movie. It's like the authority that the church is supposed to have over uh, basic everyday life in your society, it was very different. And when people want power, they had to undo the church because of the power that the church already had. And that's just the truth of it. And that's what Bonhoeffer was fighting against. Is like, but he's not just him. I'm saying in general, those kinds of denominations, or whatever you want to call them, that those religious institutions of claim to be Christian, it's like they're already power structures of people, and not just purely the bride of Christ that anyone can be a. They have, like in that day and time in Europe, they have power, or at least so much influence that it borders on power. Whereas maybe it's just a cultural conflict I'm experiencing, because from what I've seen in my 40 years of living in the USA, it's people just don't care for the most part, unless you are convicted religiously and you are a part of the church, that you're reading the Bible. So I guess I'm just going back to that point where when he visited America and he learned in Harlem and he went home and he discovered jazz, the music for him, and it's not that big a point in the movie, but it's just a point when he said, just listen to it, just listen to the music, no more words, listen to the music. And basically, it just comes down to how it made him feel. And the only other time they visit that in the movie was when his friend who was wrong before, and he asked him to forgive him. Can you forgive me about being so wrong? Our country's under siege, and you were right about Adolf Hitler, and I was wrong about what's going on. Basically, is what his friend tells him. He has had him nabbed, basically kidnapped. At first, Bonhoeffer didn't know who it was. It was like, no, like with the church or whatever. Out to a secret home, where his friend has collected up as many of the most gifted, whatever, or sincere theology students that there are. A couple dozen of these guys, maybe 3 dozen of these guys, and they're just going to hang out here in kind of a secure and safe place, and be, you might say, spiritual warriors or whatever. Because again, they're not soldiers. They don't want to kill people to undo what's being done to their country. But I will say this: the movie does a good job of portraying that tension that was happening. How there is a danger out there. There are guys with guns, and they do use them. Whereas these are supposed to be men of God, they just don't think that way. That's not who they are. They're with the church. And so that I thought was well done. And really, as I think about it now, thinking back to that first scene of his brother and the transition from being alive and driving away to just being a dead soldier in a box and the family mourning his loss really helped set the tone for this world you're watching portrayed on the screen, and how there are consequences to be paid at every turn almost, and how bad things do happen. They happen to decent people. They happen to decent people every day. In fact, Bonhoeffer has a line in the movie at one point where it's literally the guy who is with the Nazis, but not with the Nazis. He tries at the last 5 minutes of the movie to get Bonhoeffer to a safe place, and he's saying, "Listen, we'll just get," because he had been his prison keeper at the prison, and he's been part of the crew of Nazis who have taken them out. This dozen or so Jews who are still in their charge, still captive, and because Bonhoeffer he had been praying in that cell out loud, and you can hear this man suffering his anxieties about how maybe he just wants to die after all that's happened, how his brothers died, how other people have died, and how he feels helpless and he suffered. And it's another good thing in the movie how all that went into the ears, even though this man is with the monsters. The German, the Nazi, I forget his name. Is he listed? Is it one of the people who they'll actually give me his name? Officer Ansel Nolok, played by Greg Kolpakci. I believe that's him. Um, he tries to get him out in the end, but by that time, he, Bonheimer Heifer has been so. He's like, I made my decision 12 years ago. I'm not running anymore. And he said, and the guy said, "But you deserve to be free." Like he's like almost in anguish over the fact that very soon the order is coming down, or already had come down, to execute Bonhoeffer, because he had been arrested at his home at that point in the movie, and they got him out here in this farmhouse, shelled out, bombed out farmhouse, whatever it was. Whereas they had been in that prison cell where bombs had started to drop, so much so that the explosions had shook the place until the prison bars came undone. The door was halfway off, so they were able to crash it out. They went all outside, and there were no Nazis around. They had all like sought shelter, except they didn't realize there was one guy still in the little. It's the had a little gun hole. What are those things called? It's a battlement. It's just for like a bomb shelter type of rig, but you can stick a gun out there. Uh, a guard booth basically at the entrance, the gate entrance of that prison where they were being kept, and it was such a surreal moment as they were all looking around like, where are they? And are there going to be more planes dropping more bombs? And it's like all throughout this movie, I thought about the difference in today's technology, and then it's like all these secret meetings Bonhoeffer took. Like you couldn't have anything hush hush anywhere near a phone that's always being monitored by somebody out there, or even any landline telephone. Which one line in the movie when the guy's talking, yes, this is the last secure line in this country. Like even today, that wouldn't be possible. And even if you could sneak out into the woods, if somebody is really looking for you and they're on your tail, a drone could be flown. You wouldn't know it was there, and have a super sensitive stuff. And I just thought about that. That all throughout the movie, I thought about like so much of this is impossible if the authorities. And it's one thing if nobody's looking for you, but if they are looking for you and they know who you are and they have any idea what your whereabouts, they're so able to hear what you're talking about out in public, especially. But just on your, there's no way to communicate without being tracked. and listened to today, and I just thought about that so much throughout the movie. I'm like, it had a way of taking you back in time. And again, in so many of these movies, they take a little bit of the color out, especially when there's some guy in a military uniform. There's a crater where a bomb went off. The windows are broken out of buildings and stuff, and it's just that war zone look all of a sudden because the prison was bombed. One guy's like, "What are we going to do if we try and go to the next town? There's a such and such patrol in between now there and here. They'll gun us down when they see us." Some other guy says, "We'll just run forward," and Bonhoeffer says, "No, we'll stay, we'll wait, and we'll pray." The one guy, he does bold. They start yelling, "No, don't go, don't come." He stops in the road, looks at him, and instantly is shot dead. Right, just a few feet from him, there is still a Nazi there, and he's got his rifle, and he's still there to do his job or whatever. So they lost one of them there. So I take it back. There is one scene in this movie where somebody is shot dead. I can't think of anything else like that happened. Anyways, maybe I just missed it. I didn't go to the restroom even once, so I'm like, I'm not missing any of this movie as I'm looking at it. Let me pick up the pace a little bit because I've been talking for 51 minutes. I just want to get this all out because I enjoyed the movie that much. I appreciate it that much. And just to get some closure on what I started to say about the Harlem, the first 25 minutes or whatever of the movie, when his friend takes him to a jazz club basically, and the look on his face as he's listening to the jazz band, and his face light up, and it's like, I've been playing piano or whatever since I was a kid, but I feel like this is the first time I've ever heard music. I believe him. He did such a good job of that, and his friend did such a good job. The guy offers for him to play a trumpet. It's like, no, I can't. But I think he must have looked over at the lady playing piano, and the lady's like, oh, she gets up. He sits down. They all go quiet, and he starts up with his like concerto or whatever, like classical piano playing music, and they're all looking at it like, what do we do with this? Like, it was a great scene because the trumpet player, I'm probably getting the name of the musical instrument wrong. I think it's a trumpet. Anyways, he starts tooting a little bit to try and go along with the piano playing that Diedrich is doing, Bonhoeffer. And as he starts playing it, and Diedrich looks at him, and he plays a little bit more to go along with his. And then before long, all the different members of the band with their different instruments are playing with the tune so that it all flows together with his classical whatnot that he's doing on the piano. And it was a good scene. Everybody's laughing and dancing and everything and having a good time. And they play for a couple minutes, and it comes off as this life-changing thing in his life. And when he goes home, he tells his family about how it's the whole, we need religion without Christ, again, that line, and how music is so important. And what one gripe against the movie, one gripe, it's very much in your face as far as the things of racism, prejudice, bigotry, anti-Semitism. When his friend does his little experiment and he takes him to a place like, hey, this is a nice place, we might stay for the night. Why don't you go in and book us a room? And he says, okay, I'll do that. He goes in, $2 for a room. The guy says, all right, blah, blah, blah. And then his friend, I didn't mention his friend, I mentioned jazz club, but that could be anybody. His friend is black, and he says, okay, now watch this, or something. Like, he goes in there, it's like, my friend just purchased a room here, and I'll be staying too. That whole scene of the guy all of a sudden treating him completely differently, I don't know what my gripe is except for that particular actor's acting. The guy behind the counter, it's like I felt like I was watching Man of Steel and watching some of the bullies, the adult and the youngster Clark, Clark Kent, because it's like so many people get bullies wrong. It's like it's the kind of bully you only see in a movie. And I was watching it and I'm like, really? Because when Bonhoeffer started to try to stand up, I paid good money for this. You're going to let me and my friend stay here. And I forget if he called him the N word or what, but he's like, how dare you interrupt my evening or what? It's like that whole thing was so. I mean, you get it did the job as far as people who are truly bigoted are genuinely like evil and they're mental as far as treating one person one way and then all of a sudden changing gears inexplicably. But at the same time, like he bashes Diedrich and like breaks his nose or something with a shotgun because he's like, the next words are going to come out of the barrel of this gun or something like that. And then the guy's like, I'm gonna put your keys there. We're out of here, guy. So they leave, and he's all like, listen, don't take it too hard or whatever. Trying to tell Bonhoeffer, look, these things happen. These things happen all the time. It's like, how could you stand for this injustice? Like, I deal with it every day, man. And it's another thing that like informed Bonhoeffer because he actually says a line to his friend, I've never experienced anything like that in Germany. And then it's almost like an eye roll moment as you're watching the film. You're like, oh boy, it's about to go to that and 1,000 in your country, my friend. And you're just thinking, ugh, well, you're not ready for what's transpiring in this story when you get home. But that whole scene with the guy with the hotel counter guy was like, ugh. I was thinking, people aren't. I don't want to say people aren't like nobody's like that, but the way it comes across on the screen, it's just something about it. It's like I couldn't help but think of the bullies in the Man of Steel movie, and so many other things. It's like you got to get the bully scene right, folks. You just have to. But like I said, it's one of the things that like informed him of like what's going on in this world and how people are. And whew, yeah, he goes home, and then for the next hour and a half endures all this struggle of his him losing more and more of his country to the point where he says, "We have to pray that Germany is defeated. We have to pray that Germany is defeated." He asks through secret channels for a bomb from England and this stuff. And some of the stuff I got kind of lost in the weeds because it becomes you get fatigued by all that this man is going through and all the places that he went. He comes back to America at one point to ask the preacher who was the pastor or whatever over his friend's congregation or whatever that was, and how they sat down at the beginning when they're all having dinner when he was first meeting everybody, and his sense of spirituality and what truth is and how you live was coming to be on the screen more and more. And the conversation he had with that preacher, what was his name? It was Reverend Powell Sr., played by Clark Peters. And the one of the ladies at the table says, well, you didn't think we invited you here just to show you all the nice places to eat, did you? And then they're all laughing. It's like, we want you to tell the world about. Basically, they more or less say, we want you to be a crusader for non-hate, basically, equality, love, Christian love, you might say. And it's just it is jarring to think of the movie I just watched, how he went from what things were like, the circumstances in the USA, for instance, even there in Harlem, even though in a city, probably all kind of crime, but to go from that world, even to England, but mainly where the character portrayed on screen really loved being in all those scenes, except for when the guy hit him with the shotgun, of course. But from those circumstances to the war that's been, oh man, going on in Germany, and being a captive and being a prisoner in the fetal position on that bed, praying out loud to the point to where the Nazi guard is feeling so bad for you. Because it was his country he was losing too, even though he was on the wrong side of it. It's so great when you see Bonhoeffer yelling, "My country was invaded from within." It like cuts you to your heart, you know. And again, going back to that book that I read, it was almost like seeing that man who wrote that book on the screen all of a sudden. And as much as he did try to tell other people about what was happening, but it's not that they didn't believe him per se. It's not that it's like, what can we do? What can we do? And that's the question that you're asking yourself as you follow his life and his capabilities and like, who am I? What can you do about it? All through the movie. They vanish his friend who asked him to forgive him for being wrong about Hitler. This is kind of early on in the movie and the rise of Nazism. They don't show anything. It's just a word of dialogue, one line in the movie, how that it actually does show him being arrested. But right after that, there's a line of dialogue about how the secret school, the hideout of all these seminary students from all over the country of Germany, the place was burnt to the ground. And they were compelled by the Nazis. They were like either put in a prison, arrested, or sent to the front line to fight for Germany in World War II. And it just tears you apart. Thinking of the scene where Bonhoeffer, he had started up the record player and said, "Just listen, everyone just listen to it." And he's playing the jazz, and of course they're all just being just swept away as they're sitting around in a circle and just, I don't know if they got tea or beer or whatever they're drinking with muffins or whatever, just listening to the music as it fades off and the camera is going this way and that as it phases into a whole other scene. The house was burned down and they were all done away with, sent whichever way. Some of them probably died, if not most of them, historically, and whatever happened, and to each of them. And it's like, without showing it so much, they could have done even more, I guess, as far as making you understand what's going on without. But it's so hard to make that kind of movie, isn't it? That's going to take a lot more money, more money for more productions, more this and that to get that kind of visual stuff. But it takes you back in time. It's like, because he didn't see it happen. He didn't see the house burned. He never saw his friend again. All those students that he was like, I'm a young man myself. How could you make me? What do I have to teach? All these people. And the guy said, well, teach him your heart. Because it was his own charisma that people had latched onto. His willingness to preach a sermon, basically blasting the state. And then it was a contagious thing where his friend actually preached this sermon from this pulpit, looking down at the Gestapo, like a couple dozen Nazis basically in the front pews. And he said the words, "This is not your house." And then the Nazis almost immediately, within the next couple of days or whatever, showed up and said, "This is not your house." And they burned his house to the ground after they took him away, and his family had to go wherever. And that was a good part of the movie. They fit the line. They came for the tradesmen, and and I didn't do anything. And they came for the Jews, and I didn't do anything. And will there be anybody left to help me when they come for me? That they fit that line into the movie. He said it. You never see him again after he's arrested. That friend of his who asked him to please forgive him for being wrong about the rise of Hitler and what it meant for the church, society, the whole country. I want to say this was an excellent movie. They did a whole lot in this movie, and just to bring this thing to a close, I'll talk about the ending and that one guard who he says, "You deserve to escape." This is somebody who's with the Nazis technically, And the guy, he says, Diedrich says, we all deserve to. We all deserve to be free. We all deserve to live. And everybody's so moved and just swept away with his willingness to stay, even though they know at that point the orders come down, he's gonna be killed. They're gonna hang him like the next day or whatever. They partake. They have like the Lord's Supper. He reads the scripture about Jesus saying, "This is take, eat. This is my bread, which is my body given for you. This cup, the fruit of the vine, is my blood, which is shed for you." And like the last act of his life is sermon. He's giving people hope through Jesus, basically. And even the guard comes in, and somebody wants to object, like he can't be here, and then it's like Jesus died for us all, and he partakes of it too, and the ending is extremely well done. I mean, the whole execution scene, basically, you're almost of a mind to where after everything this man has been through and the things he said in the past few minutes of the movie, like this is almost like a reward. Like death is not a punishment at this point. It's just what's got to happen so that he can go and be with Jesus Christ. At least that's the thought that I see the movie as giving. Like it's like all fear is gone from him. It's like he's not asking for mercy. He sees the guard when he goes all the way up to the gallows, and they're about to put head in the news, and everybody's being so respectful. Who knows if this was the way it went down in real life? But the way it went down in the movie was when he sees the guard, he can't. Who tried to? The guard played an interesting role because at one point he had dropped his Bible, and the guard must have seen it. He snatches um, Bonhoeffer off of the bus while Bonhoeffer was having a discussion with this guy who had been his cellmate, and this was Dr. Rascher, played by James Flynn. And this is an interesting character because he was one of apparently Hitler's top scientists, but failed to give proper reverence or something along that line, and ended up in a jail cell with Diedrich. And he does not believe. He's not a Christian. We'll just say that. And you see that echoed in his pessimism, his hopelessness. It's a sad thing, but it's one more thing that Bonhoeffer had to like fight against. It's like when it was his cellmate, and then when he's on the bus, and the guy just kind of goes like sour face as the guard who snatched Bonhoeffer off the bus, and he decked him like what are you doing? And then he like whispers into his ear, "Take the Bible." He's got the Bible. Because he was gonna lose his Bible and his journal that he was keeping. His only thing that he had of his worldly possessions, basically. The guard cared enough about him, like take the. He makes him while the others, so in such a way that the Nazis can't actually see what he's doing. Take the Bible. He puts it in his pocket, and then he decks him again, like in the gut, like punching him. And like that's the only way he could do to keep up appearances, to fake hit him, but actually really hit him in the stomach a couple times, so that Bonhoeffer wouldn't be without his Bible and his journal that he had, because one of the Nazis had kind of like pushed him too hard. He tripped and it fell. He's trying to get it, and they're like getting him onto the bus, pushing him around and stuff. There's a lot of pushiness in this movie, as you can imagine. Anyways, at the end of the movie, when that guard is standing there and Bonhoeffer is about to be hung, he's like tearing up. He's looking down. And of all verses, I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Bonhoeffer started saying, said, mourn with those who mourn, like reading the Beatitudes in the Bible. Blessed are those, basically reading the Beatitudes. It ends with, they will see God. And that's going to be burned in my brain forever, because that's the last scene of the movie. After all this, and then he just kind of closes his eyes. The music goes perfectly with all this. The screen goes black, and you hear the sound of like the stand being kicked out from under Bonhoeffer, and he's dead. And just What more can I say? What more can you say? It was the best. I don't know if they could have done the ending any better than that. It was really really well done, and that's how you can do it right there. And again, going back to what I talked about in the beginning, the information that immediately comes on the screen about on the such and such a date, Bonhoeffer was executed for attempted murder of, and again, the assassination plot, all this stuff, being a spy, espionage, whatever. I think there was only like 2 weeks difference in between when Bonhoeffer was executed and when Hitler himself committed suicide, if I remember those dates I saw on the screen correctly. And I just thought to myself, that is unbelievable. That is crazy how quickly things happen. And again, the communication difference between then and now. And it's like, it was only like 80 years ago, but at the same time, you're like, you feel like you've been with this man literally after watching this movie, and the way he died, the grace that he exuded at the end when it's like there's nowhere to run and I'm not running anymore. He had successfully saved 7 men's lives. Again, these men had been traumatized by smuggling them into France earlier in the movie with Hans. That was a great scene. That's when I was almost tearing up, like when he's patting him on the shoulder because Hans realized we just saved 7 people's lives, and all of this we managed to actually help somebody. And oh yeah, that's another thing he was supposed to be in trouble for, money laundering. That's why because they gave like 100,000 marks or whatever it was. That must have been a lot of money at that time to get the French, no, the sorry, the was it the Swiss, some Swiss military guards on the border. Like they're supposed to be delivering. These men are supposed to be delivering a diplomatic message to whatever. And from his friends here and there in Ireland and different places, he had come up with this money, and that was a great thing in the movie when it showed that. And then I think shortly thereafter was when Bonhoeffer gets arrested. But man, I have been going on for an hour and 12 minutes. That is insane. It's going to take forever to upload this. It was a beautiful movie, beautifully done, and I'm glad I was able to catch it. I'm glad I was able to see this because I wouldn't have seen it if not this one opportunity. So there you go. And with that, I can't talk anymore, folks. If anybody has ever listened to me all the way through a review video or whatever, thank you so much. I don't deserve that kind of time and attention. So I'll just say thank you for listening to me. And Bonhoeffer is definitely worth a watch. Very, very good. And I'll just say till next time, folks. Thanks.